We're more like the big old lobster. We have these long, big arms that come out, and on the pincers, one of them on a lobster is made for cutting. It's very sharp and it's made for cutting, and the other is dull but strong, and it's made for crushing. And that sometimes in our relationships, however inadvertently, however unintentioned, that we reach out and we're skilled and deft at cutting and at crushing.
Well, hello, friend. This is Heartbeat, the podcast, featuring insights taken from the more than 50 years of work done by our friend Landon. Today's episode is lifted right out of the latest update to the Heartbeat app, a course entitled The Significant 7 Keys to Fully Living.
I'd like to begin tonight with a story. This is one of my favorite stories, and it's one that I think gets us right into the heart of relationships quickly. It seems that there was a woman who came to see her rabbi one day, and she was extremely distressed. Distressed was hardly the word for it. She was apoplectic. She said, "Life is just awful, Rabbi. Life is just awful." She said, "I'm living out there with my husband, and he's hard to get along with, and I have my 3 children running around all over the house." She said, and then 2 weeks ago, his parents moved in to our little old house, and then last week, my parents moved in. She said, "Life is just awful. Life is awful." And the rabbi listened and looked at her, and he said, Now, let me tell you what I'd like for you to do. I'd like for you to go home and go out to the barn and get the cow and bring the cow into the house and come back and see me next week. But you just do as I tell you. So she goes home and she gets the cow and she brings the cow into the house. Well, she comes back a week later and she's worse. She's just screaming how terrible, how awful life is, that she has that husband who's not getting any better, and those 3 children running around, and his parents and her parents, and now that big old cow slopping around through the house. Life is just awful. And he says, now, let me tell you what I'd like you to do. I'd like for you to go home and go to the barn and get the horse and bring the horse into the house and come back and see me next week. But don't protest, just do as I tell you. So she goes by, she goes to the barn, she gets the horse, brings it into the house, and she comes back, and she almost can't speak the next week. It is just so pathetic. And she goes through the whole thing about what a terrible mess the whole house is, and that big old cow and horse clomping around through it. Life is awful. And he said, "Now, here's what I'd like for you to do. I'd like for you to go home and get that cow and that horse and put them back in the barn and come see me next week." Well, she goes home, she comes back the next week, and she's all smiles. And she says, "You know, Rabbi, life is so wonderful without the cow and the horse." Now, there are a lot of cows and horses in our relationships. And tonight, we're hopeful that we can begin to move some of those cows and horses out. You know, when you take hold of a relationship, you usually think that you're taking hold of something that's warm and cuddly and fuzzy, and you just kind of get the warm and fuzzies after it. But sometimes it's like that old Russian story of the friend who called to another friend in the dark and said, "I've caught a bear." And the other friend called back and said, "Well, bring him here." And he calls back and says, "He won't come." And he calls back and says, "Well, then you come." And his friend says, "He won't let me." And some way, that's the way the relationships are. We get them and they start out all warm and fuzzy, but then somehow we wind up just stuck. We lose all of our flexibility. We lose all of our freedom. And instead of that relationship nurturing and encouraging us and making life richer, sometimes it can go the other way. The Russian writer Pasternak said, "Human beings are moved in one of 2 ways. They're moved by the cudgel, by the big stick, or they're moved by the inner music." In relationships, it seems that the big stick is applied more than inner music. because we may not know what the inner music of relationships really is. And not knowing that inner music, all we know to do is react. And so relationships may be one long series of negative reactions. Is there anything that can be done about that? Well, it's helpful to remember kind of the nature of human beings, that human beings, a human being, despite all the ways that we've gone wrong, a human being is really something. It's a mammal, not a crustacean. And sometimes in our relationships, we forget that we're mammals instead of crustaceans. Now, the mammal is soft on the outside and has the hard structure on the inside. But the crustacean is just the opposite. The crustacean has that real hard shell on the outside, and they're soft on the inside. But if you've noticed, sometimes human beings in relationships behave more like the crustacean than the mammal. We're more like the big old lobster. We have these long, big arms that come out, and on the pincers, one of them on a lobster is made for cutting. It's very sharp and is made for cutting, and the other is dull but strong, and it's made for crushing. And that sometimes in our relationships, however inadvertently, however unintentioned, that we reach out and we're skilled and deft at cutting and at crushing, when really we're made for touching. Human beings on the outside are soft. They're made for touching. They're made for this inner music on the inside to begin to find its way out of this touching, this soft exterior. Human beings are made to be held. Now, it's a difficult thing. And I have to say almost at the beginning that relationships, sometimes I just say it as an absolute flat statement. They don't work. They just simply don't work. Now, all these centuries we've been moving along and talking about working on relationships, and we've got to make this relationships work. But the truth is that so far, the things just don't work. They don't work very well. And so I want to start there tonight, that they don't work so well. Now, one of the reasons that I want to start there is to try to get some of the assumptions back. We take relationships for granted. And if we could move that back just a little bit tonight, we would have made real progress in the matter of relationships. Because sometimes people say, when we were dating, there were no problems. Then we got married. And I was working with a media consultant once, and he said, I was in this marriage of, 12 or 15 years, and it was pure hell. And we divorced. Now he said, I've lived with this woman for 4 years, and it was marvelous. It was a wonderful relationship. And then, a year and a half ago, we got married. And it's just been hell ever since. And he said, now, why do you think it's that way? Well, if I could answer that, I'd be the wisest person on earth. All it underscores is that relationship is not easy, and we wouldn't keep doing it if it wasn't so important. We're just made to be together. One of our objectives tonight, because they can be so toxic, and because there may be one or two individuals in this audience tonight who are in relationships that are extremely difficult. They may be extremely toxic. They may be abusive. Or there could be one or two in this audience who's in a relationship that's basically dead. It's been dead for years. And for reasons that may be known to you, and they may be very good reasons, you have chosen to continue in that relationship. There are others who are in relationships that are just difficult. They're difficult every day, and they require lots of energy and lots of thought and lots of patience. But you have chosen, and perhaps for very good reasons, to stay in those relationships. And so one of the things that I hope that we can do tonight is to show you how perhaps you could keep on enjoying your own life, even if the relationship you're in isn't the best. Or put another way, how does an individual keep from losing one's life in the midst of a dreadful relationship? How can I somehow understand that while my life is relationship, on the one hand, on the other, it's very important for me not to lose my life in relationship? On the one hand, I know that relationship can be the cause of a lot of unhappiness. And if it is, on the other hand, how can I somehow be happy even in this relationship that is not quite what I want it to be? That's our work. So let's get on with it. As W.C. Fields once said, it's time to take the bull by the tail and squarely face the situation. Now, as we squarely face this situation of relationships tonight, I think the best way through this is to give you some undeniables right off the reel. I gave you a list of undeniables last night about self-esteem. Tonight I want to give you some undeniables about relationship. These are things that are absolutely, completely, and totally, undeniably true about relationships. And because it is so complex and can get so complicated, I think that if we have a list of things that are true no matter what, that perhaps it'll help get us through some rough spots. Because our real objective, of course, is to find ways to deepen and enrich and heal our relationships. What we want to do is be happy in our relationships and to make that relationship as happy as we can. Okay, are you ready? I think you have note paper in the flyers that you received, or you may have something else to write on. The first thing that is undeniably true about relationships is this: any relationship can change because of you. Any relationship can change because of you. Now, the simplest way out of that one is, if you change, the relationship has changed. And so it's not simply a matter of getting another individual to change. This is more about you, maybe, than about the other person, which is often the way through difficult relationships. Any relationship can change because of you. Now, that can happen on the simplest of scales. A real estate woman told me recently about her mother-in-law, who is 80-some years old and still drives. And she drives a white Mustang convertible. And she loves to go fast. And so she's barreling off down the road one day, and a trooper spots her, this speeding car, and pulls her over. Now, the relationship between a speeding driver and a state trooper can be tense, to say the least. The trooper pulls her over, lights flashing. He walks up, tops down, he looks in, and here's this wonderful, sweet person who looks up, smiling at him. And he's a little nonplussed and taken aback, and he said, "Finally, lady, weren't you going a little fast?" She said, "Yes, sir, it's hard to keep this baby down." Now, do you think that relationship probably changed? I suspect it did. I was at an airport once, got a flight canceled. And when the flight was canceled, it was distressing. It was late, and I was weary as I could be, and I was going to a wonderful little retreat spot in Vermont. And I was already, in my heart and mind, I was getting there, when suddenly I realized that this flight wasn't going to go. No announcements even had been made yet, but people had already suspected, and so people had become quite angry, and there was a big crowd that was going to be on that flight. And finally, someone came on and said the flight's been canceled and you can either stand in line here or go to the front, to the main terminal. Well, I took off just as hard as I could run to the main terminal, thinking that'd be my best shot. Well, it was bedlam out there as well. I moved up to the person who was attending the computer and mentioned what was wrong. And she said, "Sir, I'll get you to Boston, but I can't get you on to Vermont." And I said, "No, I want to be confirmed all the way to Vermont." She said, "I can't do that. All I can do, I can get you to Boston and you can work it out from Boston to get on home." And I said, "No, that's not what I want to do. I have a ticket here from here to Boston to my home, and that's what I want confirmed." She said, "I can't do that. We got a big crowd here. I'll get you on this flight and that's it." And I said, "No. I want to go all the way home. I don't want to get stuck in Boston. I've got friends here, and if I've got to spend the night away from my home, I want to spend it with some friends. I want my ticket." She said, "I can't do that." And I just put my hands up and I said, "Call security." Call security and have them handcuff me because I'm not leaving. You wrote me a ticket all the way home, and either fix my ticket or call security and just have me hauled away. Well, she looked at me and she said, "Let me see that ticket again." She looked at the ticket and she punched in just as fast as she could go, and she said, "You're confirmed all the way home." And I said, "Thank you very much." And when she acknowledged it, there was a little twinkle in her eye. I think the next person will probably get a little better treatment. As I walked away, someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sir, what did you do up there?" I said, "You wouldn't believe it if I told you." And as I walked away, I thought, what if she'd called security? Now, the point is that somehow in these relationships, the question is, how can we get something different in these things? How can we keep just from being locked into these situations? How can I make the relationship grow? And somehow, if I remember not to get so uptight that I lose all my resiliency so that all I can do is one thing, then I may not get very far either in that relationship, or I may not get very far even with my life. Human beings are not crustaceans. They're mammals. And they can think. Any relationship can change because of you. The second thing that is absolutely undeniably true about relationships is you can fail in a relationship without failing as a person. You can fail in a relationship without failing as a person. There may be individuals here who have been through a divorce. That just bottoms out esteem, leaves you feeling like a failure. You go back over the years and remember everything you've ever done. And it's so easy not to feel like that you have failed as a human being. But just as any relationship can change because of you, it is just as true that you can fail in a relationship without failing as a human being. Now, how can that be true? You see, when I'm in this relationship that is not going well, and I feel like I failed, and it may be a friendship, it may be a marriage, it may be with a child, any number of reasons might account for it. But how do I keep from feeling that I myself have just failed in this process? Well, I'm going to leave you just with the undeniable, because you must work through this one. That somehow, I don't know how to give you a formula for that, except to appeal to the wisdom that's in you and the common sense that's in you. That if you have failed in a relationship, look in the mirror, and that does not mean that you have failed as a person. Part of the reason is that you're never simply what has failed, are you? You're never simply that. A gentleman asked last night, how do you feel good about yourself if you're sort of presiding over a dying business? Well, you see, you're really not the dying business, are you? There's a person there that built the business. In a relationship that is dying or has died, there's a person there that went into that relationship, and that person's still there. There's a person that did some good things in that relationship, and that person is still there. There's a person that made great contributions to that relationship, and that person is still there. Failure in a relationship doesn't mean that you have failed as a human being. It's just painful, and you work through that. But you must always keep reminding yourself that you're still a man, that you're still a woman, and that your life isn't over, and that your life hasn't been given an F. You still get an A in life, even if we have some failures here and there, even if that failure is something as difficult as a broken relationship. Now, I want to say that one softly and gently, because that is as tricky and as touchy as anything we could talk about tonight.
Well, if you enjoyed today's episode, and it's taken from The Significant 7, Keys to Fully Living. It's the latest addition to the Heartbeat app, and the app is available on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, or you can find out more information by visiting thisisheartbeat.com. There are 7 lessons just like this one. This is Heartbeat, the podcast, is made possible by Friends of Heartbeat. And they invite you to visit the website, thisisheartbeat.com, where you'll find out more about the app as well as other information about Landon's work. Until next time, this is Heartbeat, the podcast.